Hey, we are live, and good evening, and welcome to the April Greenways Open Space Meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 7:03. Would we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. Thank you all for coming this evening. And this, I think spring is officially upon us, or hopefully, maybe officially, but hopefully it's going to be upon us and continue. First order of business, is there any additions or deletions to the agenda? I have one.
Nothing?
Any? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, let us know what you're going to add.
Okay, I'm going to add, because we've talked about it, we need to maybe set a date also for the ribbon cutting ceremony for the trails that we've talked about. The new ferry trail and the connector from East River to Meridian. And so we need to at least maybe set a date for that.
So we need a motion, correct? To
We
add it
do.
to the agenda?
Yes.
So
we do.
I'll also move.
Moved by Mr. Geist,
Second.
second by Mr. Bloetscher. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the addition to our agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Good, thank you. I will then, we need to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll make a motion for that.
Make a motion.
Second.
Second by Mr. St. Pierre. Any discussion? All those in favor of the agenda as set, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Good. I don't believe we have any presentations this evening, unless anybody wants to do an impromptu. No, I don't think. We do our next order of business after presentations, our approval of the minutes from our closed session. And this would require under law not only to go into a closed session, but I also believe it needs a 3/4 roll call vote under the Open Space Act. Moved by Mr. St. Pierre, seconded by Ms. Urbani. Any discussion? All those in favor of the approval of the minutes from the closed session of March 7th, 2023, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions?
Did you say we needed to do a roll call for the
Do
approval
a
of
roll
this?
call. So, Mr. St. Pierre,
Aye.
Ms. Urbani,
Aye.
absent. Mr. Geist,
Aye.
still on tour. Ms. Phillips, absent. Talaba, no. Mr. Bloetscher,
Aye.
okay. And Chairman Stevenson, yay. Aye. Okay, thank you. Next order of business is our approval of our regular minutes from our March 7th meeting.
So move.
Moved by Mr. Geist.
Second.
By Ms. Urbani. Any discussion? All those in favor of the approval of the minutes of our March 7th regular meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Good. Mr. Bloetscher, did you have a comment or something on that, or?
No, I was just,
All right,
I'm good.
thank you. We have no action items this evening because we were very active the last meeting or so. We do have some discussion items, however. And I do know if you missed the meeting or if you were not unable to attend the Township Board meeting, that at the last Township Board meeting, the property acquisition that we had made a recommendation to complete was accepted by the Township Board unanimously. And so the Meridian property on the north end off of Horse Mill was now the 2.01 acres is now part of Greenways open space. And the purchase price from our fund was, our acquisition fund was $128,000, $250. So $128,250. The update was that our remaining funds that we have for property acquisition is $21,750, period. Because we started off this fiscal year and last year with $150,000 flat. Any discussion or any?
I have a question here, because I noticed that in last year's budget, we had some income from interest and also contributions in that. And the way the finance director, it just lumps them all together and adds that in. So that extra money that came in, which account does it get credited to? Can it be used for capital? Is it only used for maintenance, or is it split?
My understanding is that those are unrestricted funds that could be used for either. Okay, and correct me if I'm wrong on that. And so, there's two things that happen. People donate, and we encourage that. If people want to continue to donate property or money to Greenways Open Space, that's certainly a noble consideration that people may want to do. So that that we do have donations per se.
Yeah.
Secondly, we do know that from our dump the junk, we receive money back from Fritz Enterprise from a lot of the scrapping that gets done. So all the metal that's there. So some of the numbers, as you see coming in, it's like, that was from our 2 dump to junk events. So we're able to, to put that into our one or two accounts. And then lastly, we do collect interest on the accounts that are there. Okay, to what level and degree? I think we could ask the township manager or certainly the business manager. But my understanding, and again, I've only been around for a short time, is that these money can be used for either. Okay, since it's in, at least unless it's specifically designated. So
That's true. Okay, but this would not have been a one-year occurrence. This would be current every year. So what has happened to those monies in the past?
They've gone into the account for which they were designated for. In other words, if the acquisition, I think in the past, if the acquisition fund received some interest from the accounts that were in the monies that were in the account, it went into that account. I think that's the way it handled in the past. But there was nothing written that it must go into this account or that
the other,
account.
right?
So I guess I'm just wondering whether this, this $21,750 is left over from $150,000. But like I said, so that basically assuming that none of that revenues or income we had was allocated to that particular account.
That's my understanding, is that was
Okay.
not. Carl, you had a comment, or?
No, I was going to say, if there's a question on that, I would suggest turning it over to or asking the township's finance officer,
Sure.
Ann Darsnick.
Yep.
And Ann
I'd be curious.
is very, very approachable. I have found her to be very helpful, and she does a remarkably good job with all of the things that we have. The general number there is 734-676-4422, and she is at extension 224. So again, 734-676-4422, extension 224. And tell her Carl sent you.
Yeah, I will.
Okay. Now for the record, I just want to be clear. I'm not allocating, moving monies into the account, because obviously if we put more money into the capital side of it, then there's less money for maintenance, which is, the next shrinking fund, so to speak, that we
Yes.
have.
Well, and again, it's my understanding when open space millages were passed, there were 2 separate millages. One was for property acquisition,
Correct.
very clearly, and another one was for maintenance of existing open space or property that had been newly acquired. Are you shrinking on us? Come on. Anyway, please sit up. Please sit up, Ms. Urbani. There you go. So, anyway, but, I mean, that's the way that works. And we do know, that, for a fact that, okay, the monies that we had for property acquisition was set as, as it had been for several years. We were at $150,000. I didn't see that growing at any time.
Yeah.
So the assumption could be that any kind of interest in that went into the maintenance fund, okay, because that's the way it was gonna play, but we'll find out.
Yes, it just leaves us a little flexibility to say if somebody comes up with a sweetheart
Right.
deal and they need, they want $25,000 and, we have some discretionary.
But you can't move from one to the other,
That is
It's
correct.
I
for a
understand that.
spec- It's for
I
a
just meant
specific
this.
purpose.
I think
Okay.
it's close to, must be well over $100,000 in the maintenance fund.
Oh, yes,
Oh.
right, yes.
150,
I
60,000.
did not, I was looking for it, and I know they've been on spring break and that, I was looking for the financials for the month of March, okay, from the township, and I haven't received them. And when I do, I'll forward that to everyone, and then we can take a look.
Perfect.
And you can see the numbers that, the 21.7 is gonna be in the acquisition account. And again, it's I think it's more like 130 or 140 some thousand that are
Okay.
in the maintenance. We did know at our last meeting, we set our budget for this fiscal year at 36,000. So and again, we're trying to be fiscally responsible, and we reduced that from 52,000 from before. So, does that answer your question?
I would add comment there, and that is, again, my thanks to Bill Stevenson for the very hard negotiating, good work that he did in terms of acquiring the property. And Bill, I'm very serious about that. We sat in there for a half an hour going back and forth with the township supervisor and the township manager, and you didn't give an inch, and at the end of the day, we reached a principle based upon a principled decision that led to that figure. It wasn't something that was just pulled out of thin air where we could have gone with 128,251 or 128,249. It was based upon a good, hard analysis, and in fact, the 7-0 vote on the board suggests that the board as a whole, individually and entirely, thought that it was the right thing to do, and they understood the principle involved. And Bill, I just want to thank you again for making that happen. You were a tiger in there, and I think it made a big difference for everybody. And
Thank
I
you.
just wanted to say
Appreciate that.
thank you publicly
Well,
again.
no, thank you all, okay? I am merely one of many public servants at this table, so it's like, but again, I do appreciate that.
But you're the last one I'd want to negotiate with.
And, well, that's okay, and it was more, I was gonna say, it was more like an hour and a half meeting that I think that we had, rather than a half hour.
Just
So-
seemed like it.
It just seemed like, no, it was longer than that. I can also tell you, I have been, and I think I sent this to the committee too, is that we have received an email about properties somewhat adjacent off a horse mill now that people are interested in selling or donating, or so there's been an interest in that regard. And I think you're all at least somewhat aware of the one communique, and I politely said back, wrote back that we're in the process right now of other property acquisition, that because it hadn't been finalized, and that we are trying to, we're trying to be prudent managers of what existing money. I didn't come back to this person and say, oh, if you'd like to donate or that, but that might be the next, unless you think that maybe that would be appropriate, that considering what we have at this time, or because you didn't put any kind of a number or a figure on it, so.
I think that's appropriate to respond to them in a polite way and ask what they have in mind. And if they're interested in selling something, it would have to be the right place, the right price, and the right time, unless we could get some of the money from the St. Pierre family and maybe loan it to us or give it to us.
I think the other thing too is that if looking at donation and that, I think the assessed value that the township has is probably a starting point for them to look at for what the value would be in that regard.
I think that's what we've done in the past. start off with, what is it assessed at?
What's it assessed, and then go from there, yeah.
Right, and that makes sense because by law, the township assessor and every assessor is required, every community is required to update every 2 years. And so that number would be probably a good place to start from, and I
Sure.
think that would be good. Something else that I'm going to be bringing up to the township manager is perhaps looking for grants for acquisitions or maintenance on some of these matters. I think there's a lot of money out there, still COVID money that is available, and hopefully we would be able to do something with that and have some grants that are matching, at least in part.
Well, one thing you
Quite
could, excuse
helpful.
me for butting in. So, one thing you can mention to these folks that are interested in selling, and point out that our acquisition funds are largely depleted. And
Right.
so if they really want to get out from under the tax burden of this property, the donation is
Donation would be the way to go.
is
I
an
would think.
advantageous thing for them.
Yes, yes, I would do that.
It looks like that's not that would be very expensive to try and build there.
It would be expensive, I think, right. And then maybe they found that out too.
Right,
Right.
right. So selling it to somebody else is
I
probably
think
not.
there's approximately, I made an analysis here a number of years ago. It may be out of date now, but as of right now, with the 2 acres that we've just purchased, I think it's about between 85 to 87 acres of vacant property that's privately owned that might be amenable for purchase by the open space program.
Good, yeah, okay, I understand but like if we have depleted funds, it's like, well, this is an avenue that we, down the road that we need to rethink and consider.
Carl, going to your point about maybe soliciting for grants and that, who would know about that, or how do we go about, investigating something like that?
2 things. There's a site out there that's called Grant Finder. I wrote a grant for, and the reason I know a little bit about that is Grant Finder can tell you what's available. Derek Thiel is probably the best source for that. He has written a number of grants, both when he was the airport manager here, when he was in Gibraltar, and now that he's come back a little over a year and a half ago. Derek helped guide me through a grant with the Ralph Wilson Fund. The grants can be very specific. Ralph Wilson was the owner of the Buffalo Bills, started out as an insurance company here in southeastern Michigan, and left the Buffalo Bills to a trust to be sold, and all the money, which I understand is about $1.3 billion, to be used up within 10 years for 3 different classifications of community projects. One of the projects that you will see that is benefiting from that is going to be the extension of the bike path along Grow Road, from Grow Road and East River, putting up a fence on the west side of the maintenance road there that will connect to Gibraltar Bay, where there's the Detroit River International Wildlife Refuge that is maintained by one of the great organizations we have on Grosse Ile, and that's Nature and Land Conservancy. So Ralph Wilson, we applied for the maximum amount of the grant, which was $50,000. They approved $45,000. And then we had a GoFundMe page from a private individual family that came up with another $30,000 plus, and we're going to be able to move that fence or build that fence and use the maintenance road there. But the sources, when you look at Grant Finder and then perhaps talk to Derek Thiel, we could look at some of those things. I will tell you, our ability to obtain a grant is somewhat handicapped by the fact that this is, of the 17, 18 communities downriver, this is the most affluent community. And we are not as diverse a group as other communities are. So we're hopeful, but I don't believe there's a reason to believe overly optimistic. So there is money out there, but that's why we haven't really pursued much. The bike path extension along East River, and then there's a proposal for a bike path extension from the county bridge down along West River to Bellevue, essentially a sidewalk, and then Bellevue east to Meridian, is being funded by a separate grant. But again, that's a very specific grant, and land acquisition and maintenance is something that this community, we certainly should look into it, but I would not be expecting a lot. But Derek would know more about that than probably anybody.
Thank you. No, it's good.
And I'll be talking to him tomorrow on several matters, and I'll make a point of bringing that up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good, thank you. Very good. Anything else on property acquisition? So we're good? I do apologize, I was not available. I think we were looking to do a walkthrough, and I've had some family issues that we had to deal with. But I would like to, since we now have acquired this parcel off of, on Meridian off of Horse Mill, I would like to tromp through it and see exactly more so. I mean, we've been through it before, but maybe take a little closer look in terms of like what, the flora and the fauna and the issues that we may see there, okay, that we may want to do. The other piece we want to do is take a look at the Lowry cutouts, I'm calling those, the staging areas that were used for the DTE work on the thoroughfare canal. I mean, right now it's pretty much closed up because the bridge is there, but I think we could park on Gray's Drive and walk across the street and take a look at those areas there, because there's some discussion about, we know that there's open space property in there, and as we were studying our property acquisition, like certain parcels that we may want to purchase, the township has some surplus property back in there that we may be able to utilize, and we've talked about this as a kayak launch, a floating dock, access for the public to go to the thoroughfare canal, because they were able to access it on the east side, which is open space by where the bridge is there, the bike path. Now it's a question of, could we also maybe be able to access it on the other side? So those are at least two areas. In addition to, I think there's a question that we're going to raise again, that next item, about the culverts in the flooding in certain areas that we need to look at too, so we can talk about that. But is there a good time, or, I mean, I know Easter's coming up and we're pretty hectic right now, but I mean, first off, does that seem like a good idea that we do that kind of a walkthrough, Okay, so
Maybe we could try, maybe someday is agreeable with anybody, maybe the week after Easter.
Fine with me?
I two things on that. Number one, that area can be, the grubbed out area that is on the west side of Meridian,
Right.
Has the potential to be very, very wet, particularly as you get closer to the canal and you run into
Right.
some wetlands there. That can be very difficult, so you might want to wait, as Cliff says, a week and a half, maybe the week after Easter, to do that. Second thing was, I did take the liberty of going back there with both the township manager and the township supervisor. And we were looking at that. The property is somewhat irregular in that a portion of it is township owned, and the adjoining properties on the two sides are part of Greenways open space. I approached the supervisor and manager, asked them to go back for a walk there, and we had talked about that. And we found that if you go back on the north side where there is a tree line, they had grubbed out the area, knocked down all the trees and the brush for purposes of the water line. If you go to what would be the northwest corner of that tree line, there is a sanitary sewer that I understand is 70 years old and in disrepair, but there is an excellent place to access the canal just beyond that, where you're not going through any of the wetlands type area. All of the different kinds of marsh and stuff like that, that's just rather difficult to go through when it's dry. And in speaking with John Keim, who is the maintenance lead for the DPS, he indicated that they need to bring a truck back there to do a scanning, a video of the lines to see if there's infiltration. And in order to get the truck close enough, they're going to have to knock down some of the old mounds that were created by dumpings there. And we might be able to benefit from having that done. But there was a lot of enthusiasm by the location where we would have access to the canal, and there are really no neighbors that are within a couple of 100 feet easy. And unless you go across the canal, but it's a pretty good location. So there is some enthusiasm there. There was a thought about even at some point to allow for parking so that you don't have vehicles getting stuck, to put in some kind of gravel there and then cap it off with wood chips and things like that. But go back, take a look at it. It's very worthwhile. It'll be an easy project to do because everything has already been leveled. And as stuff starts to grow back, it may take 15 years before there's an appreciable difference, but I think it's very worthwhile to take a look at, walk back there and access for the water. And
Any of that near the 4 lots that we had looked at last year?
it's north of that. And we would need to have we'd need to have permission from the township board in order to put anything across the township property there. That did not seem to be a very large hurdle, though, but we would need that. And absent going out and paying for a survey, it's very difficult to say exactly where Greenways open space ends and township starts, township ends, and then the other segment of Greenways open space. So just to make sure that we're covered on that, the ideal thing would be get the blessing from the board and go back but I would be very, very interested in what ideas everybody comes up with. With John Keim, I have come to understand, give him a project and he will figure out a way to do it. And he and Bill Stevenson and Ray Geist will go ahead and walk back there and say, here's what we're thinking about with Meridian. And at one point, I think it was Bill that asked me if I was a little bit unhappy with the way that turned out. And I said, well, yeah, the only unhappiness I have, however, is I didn't have that vision to see what could be done here. And when you give John Keim a job, he does a very good job and is just a wonderful person to work with.
We really, I can tell you right now, really owe them a great deal of gratitude for with the crew that they have and the work that they do about keeping the island maintained as they do and that. So it's good. But can we set a date, or is there a possible? I mean, are we looking like on a Saturday morning, or is there an evening that might be better for everybody? I mean, what's your pleasure?
Saturdays seem to work best, maybe the Saturday after Easter.
You're busy? Is that a?
I have track meets on the 15th and the 22nd, so.
Aren't you a little old to run?
Yeah,
I am.
he runs them. He runs them. You know how that goes.
That's
There's a
why I do it
difference
from a
between
stationary
running in them and running them.
But you're always welcome to come help out, Carol. if you
Yeah,
want
I
to.
know.
I run from those things.
Is there maybe even I don't know, I can speak as a retiree, like, hey, this is, anytime's good, or most often, but I know that's not true either. But is there like a late afternoon that you might be available? I mean, I'm looking at the guy who's working here.
Yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm fine pretty much any time after 4 o'clock.
Yeah, that's fine.
You want to try for, I don't have my phone's in my, we're looking at maybe the Thursday after Easter. Is that possible?
Great.
4 o'clock? 4 is good?
Weather depending?
What's the, yeah, what,
The Thursday after Easter would be the 13th.
13th? Bert, how's that look for you? Want to try, shoot that?
4
And
o'clock then?
where do we want to try, we want to start off in Lowry?
Do that.
Let's start off there.
When you say Lowry, I'm understanding you mean the south side west meridian.
Yes, yes.
Because
yes.
the other is pretty much a construction zone. and
Right,
they have
yeah,
the
of course, you
barricades
can't,
up,
right,
so.
get there, but that's where we would start. So we're looking at April 13th at 4 o'clock. Let's try that, weather permitting.
And where are we meeting at?
We're gonna look at
I
the,
don't know, where are we gonna meet?
we wanna meet at, can we park our cars on Gray's Drive?
I would suggest you can park them on the shoulder because there's really no traffic going to Lowry because that is barricaded
Oh,
as
you're
well.
right,
So if you were to park on the,
west side.
you could do the west side, there's really no traffic there. I'm not going to recommend doing a U-turn, but
No, right, I know. what
most
you're saying.
everybody would probably do a U-turn there, so you
Right.
should be okay.
Okay, sounds
Be
good.
very careful.
So April 13th, 4 o'clock, let's shoot for that. And then after we take a look at that, maybe we'll shoot down to Meridian and Horse Mill and take a look at that.
And I would suggest bringing the color-coded plat map that we've had passed out before when we go up there, so we'll have some kind of an idea.
About what we're looking at, right,
We're at-
exactly, right.
And I think that would be a very beneficial.
And everybody has that, correct? You have the color-coded plat map?
I don't have it with me,
No,
but
I'm
I
just
do
saying
have
we have it, yeah,
Yes,
we
I
all
do
have it, yes, good. Okay, so April 13th, 4 o'clock for a little walkthrough there. Our next maybe discussion item is about trail maintenance, and Bert, maybe you want to at least take the lead on that, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. And I'll,
Okay, so my husband and I walked through, well, we started to walk through Meridian Woods and we got stopped by the inundated trail. So there's just a lot of water there, and I know this time of year it's always very wet, but it seemed like maybe with the added wood chips that some of the water's really being stopped at the north side of the trail. And in some places, it still is penetrating and going through. In other places where there are culverts or the black plastic pipes, you can see them underwater on the north side. And then when you look on the south side, they're not visible, or else there's just a trickle coming out when it looks like as much water is on the north side. If they were sloped or not damaged by maybe heavy equipment going over the trail, that there should be a lot of water coming through. So it just needs to be addressed. And then some places after a while it just becomes completely impassable. And it stays like that for quite a while, so it renders the trail really unusable.
oh, very much so.
So my thought was maybe we need somebody who actually knows about hydrology, in the environment,
Right.
instead of just the basic water goes down.
Right. I do know that I spoke, and I'm not going to tell tale out of school. I sent John Hardig, who's at least our resident wetlands and open space maybe expert in many ways, a limnologist who knows a lot about water and about that. Not a hydrologist, however. But again, and he directed me to go down to Humbug Marsh and the International Wildlife Refuge, which I did. And then he also sent me some of their crossovers over some of the streams that they've used. And he suggested that, hey, you really don't need a hydrologist or a scientist. You need just, with some practical. And in some cases, I know he even suggested that the Boy Scouts could be, utilized to making some of those. Because if you take a look at on the one trail, if you go to the Humbug Marsh area and that, if you go to their southwest trail there, then there is water that goes
Scouts
across
did
it.
those.
And he said those, okay, but it's kind of like you're walking the plank there with some netting on the top. And apparently either those raise or lower because of the water flow. But I believe our concern here, and I'm not denigrating that, okay, or saying, we're looking at solutions. I also know that as I was walking there, that he also have some larger culvert, some pipe that has been, properly submerged to the depth that it needs to with enough earth over it to allow for that. And again, if it's good enough for the International Wildlife Refuge, I guess it's good enough for us to be. And so perhaps we may want to pursue that more so than just the planking that would be going across, because the area we've all, I think, talked about this, the area when you go into the Meridian Woods, that when 100 yards in, you reach this, you see water on this side, you see water on this side, and you're right, it's dammed up. It's that's a vernal wetlands, okay? And if we've been back in there even in the winter, what people don't realize, there's almost like a huge lake in the middle of that area, okay? That is like really, it could be pretty, seemingly deep, depending on the rainfall. And again, the proper treatment of the environment and the proper treatment of wetlands is, it has to be able to flow. If not, you're going to kill all the trees, or you're going to have some other issues. I would like to, and Ray has some pictures.
No, I just think, using an example, I think within like a few hundred yards when you enter Meridian Woods from the west, you do have that area, and it looks like there's like a little stream going through there, and it needs to go through there. You sink a culvert in there, a pipe, I don't care if it's concrete or those PVC or something like that,
Right.
Get it down there. You can pack it in with stone on either side, lodge it in, and just put a bunch of wood chips over it. And then, might be some other areas of that. We may not be able to do all the areas because, again, the water's gonna go, and where we have the trails, they may be somewhat underwater. But some of the areas where you actually see some flowing waters, those
Yeah,
would
you've
be
seen that.
the areas we could look at first,
Right.
and then go from there.
Right. Well, I'm not adverse to contacting like the University of Michigan, Michigan State, expert hydrologists, okay, or an engineering firm if need be, in order to do that. It's one thing to say, oh yeah, let's get a group together and we'll do it. It's another thing, well, there has to be a rationale and some science behind it too, and so that you're making, informed decisions in that.
Maybe you said universities, maybe there's some grad student working on some project that these fall within their learning
Exactly.
expertise.
I would
in
think
that.
so too, I do know a professor from the University of Michigan Dearborn, Dorothy McClear, is an expert when it comes to wetlands and those types of things. So I'll try to reach out to her, and if she can't do it herself or take a look with us, maybe she can at least point us in the right direction. But again, this is and here's the balance we have. I mean, we have to be very sensitive to the environment and the ecosystem that we have, and so its frailty. But by the same token, we want to have people to have access to this, to nature and I think increasingly so. And the way, at least our vision is that, what can we do in order, you got to maintain that balance, because if it goes all one way or the other, I think you got an issue. Okay, and we do have an issue.
I think if we did that and then worked in conjunction with John Keim, so that he understands what we're trying to do, and she could give an idea. And even if you're just driving a stake in the ground with an orange marker on there that tells you, that's how deep you want to be. You don't want to go any deeper because
Right.
you'll drain all of the water out, and you need to go deep enough to preserve what's there, but you don't want to flood all the trees out and kill those.
Right.
We've done that. So I would recommend setting up something, if she's willing.
Sure.
Have John come by, and we could probably work something out with Charlie Campo for culvert as well.
Right, very much so.
So-
Has anybody walked the new ferry trails? Did you, and there is a culvert that we put in there. Does that seem to be doing the work or doing the job there or not? Or did you not go far enough back?
No, we went all the way through, and it seems to be doing a good job. And then it gets kind of confusing as you go further. When it crosses, going from east to west, then the water just kind of seems to kind of spread out as it will. And so, I mean, it's kind of odd situation. There's two outfalls from on the east side, and then and it seems like maybe the height differential's not right there.
Right. Well, you do go from a higher elevation at one point, I know, and it's almost like a valley, okay, and where you get that low, and then it goes back up again, okay? And I know that Gradall in the township, you know, Derek Thiel has directed them, and John Kime, Gradall was back in there, and in that one piece of property off Island Boulevard, we were looking to, to acquire at one point, but that's where they had dredged that, so I didn't know if that was helping that situation or.
That runs generally west and a little bit south and connects to the drain that you were talking about, Bert. So we're getting more water in there than we've ever had before. If you look at that property that we had looked at, that 0.37 acres,
Right.
The drain starts from a little, south and west of that, and then drains all the property. And apparently it's been very successful because the people that were adjoining property owners on Island are dry now for the first time in many, many, many years. So good news is the drain's working. The bad news is it's connected to where we had that swale now and it goes
Right,
over it.
okay, so it's like, okay, well, I get it.
But again, that's a learning curve with respect to where all that water is going to go at any particular time, and it's clay, so it's not going to. Not a lot of it's going to go in the ground.
Right.
And I think John and Derek had also indicated there was a similar drain that was done by the second ditch behind Ferry Properties, or about 800 feet from the road, that had been plugged with trees and deadfall and new growth. And Gradall was going to go in there as well and do some ditching to relieve some of the water accumulation there. So I think we may have just suffer from a amount of drainage that has not been present before, and water will find its own level.
Oh, yeah.
And hopefully, and I'd like to go back there and take a look at it and see what we can do. And maybe that's the third leg on our safari here.
That
so.
could be, right. I'd like to go do that.
But I appreciate Bert and John going back there.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, go ahead.
So John and I just finished a virtual class that was run by Friends of the Detroit River and Friends of the Rouge and Huron River Watershed Council about rain gardens and how to build them and why they're so helpful. You know, they're not to hold water permanently, but to slow water down. And, you know, so that might be something even to think about for residents to learn about and put on their own property, so that we have, with development, we have an increasing amount of impervious property. And then we try to figure out how we're going to deal with the water that is just rushing off. And with the increasing intensity of storms that we're getting, you know, it's more water and more water moving faster. So what rain gardens do with native plants and the way they're structured is that they slow it down and then and then direct it to where you want it. So
Great. I would like to learn more about those. I think the public would like to know more about those. I was going to make another comment about Gradall. Gradall is currently, they're doing ditching, you know, for those whose backyards are flooding, I know, have for years, off of Manchester and off of Meridian. So what used to be called Lake Nash, when Augie Nash lived in that backyard there, but that's also adjacent to open space property behind there. And so they've been ditching, and so hopefully that'll alleviate so there'll be some natural flow. Okay, and again, it's a balance. It's not an easy process, and you need to be sensitive to. Okay, anything else on that? So yes, I'll contact Dorothy McClure, and then I'll let you know, and others, and maybe at least point us in the right direction. Our next little point of discussion is that our Dump the Junk, Find a Treasure date has been set for May 6th. 2023. This is our spring event, and it is going to be from 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock at the DPW yard on Grow Road, 9555 Grow. And we're able to, at one point, we had conversation with St. James in terms of their rummage sale, which also ran somewhat concurrently. Actually, it's going to be before, and they may be ending their event on May 6th, but they are not going to be taking our leftover treasures. But Cass Community Services in Detroit will be there. And so we've coordinated with Reverend Sue Patu, and who has also another helper to come with her. And they will be helping at the end of the day, anything that's not picked up and that is going to be usable or reusable will go to Cass Community Services in Detroit, so that's a win-win in that regard. So
And last spring, they took a full box truck load of furniture
Right.
and stuff that was
very much so.
very helpful
can
for
be
both
used.
of us.
But again, dump the junk, find a treasure on May 6th, so mark your calendars. I know there'll be an article in the Grosse Grand about this, just to remind people, let them know.
Are we gonna get something on the
Yeah,
township website?
you were saying that too. So, Carl, if you're gonna be talking to Derek tomorrow, could you make sure that maybe that gets on the website and we need to
Absolutely.
communicate? Appreciate that. Our fifth item that I placed on there was our ribbon cutting ceremony, for lack of a better word, for the two trails that we have that are new trails. You got the new ferry trail that we've invested a lot of time and effort and blood, sweat, and tears in, that we're still have struggles with. But again, there's an absolute new trail for people, and I do believe that people have been using that pretty extensively. Those of you that live in that neighborhood. I do know that the East River connector to the Meridian Woods has been very successful, and I constantly see people out there either riding their bikes or walking their dogs or walking or running, and so it's been extensively used. I was thinking that how about the Sunday, since Dump the Junk is on May 6th, how about on May 7th, not to take it away, but maybe for, and I can't imagine these are going to be extensive unless somebody's going to be long-winded in their speeches, Mr. St. Pierre. But, we'll
Bloetscher.
Mr. Bloetscher, no, okay.
Ouch.
Okay, no, or Mr. Stevenson. But,
Pray for rain that
it would
day.
just, right, if nothing else, it's a great photo op that we can invite people to, and at least you have them, we'll try to, but I was thinking maybe that Sunday, maybe like at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, okay? And I don't want to take you away from your families 2 days in a row on Saturday, you're doing Dump the Junk, Find a Treasure, and then next day doing that. But whenever, I'm just looking at a time. I do know I'm going to be out of town from May 11th through May 17th, so I'll be gone.
I think that'd be a good idea to do at the ferry on May 7th, and let's take a look at the culverts before we do anything with Meridian, so that perhaps is a little drier.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just throwing that date out there if that's possible.
I wonder if that's confusing for the public and the,
Oh, I know what you're saying.
Yeah,
Like you
because
have too many things together.
right, and people were used to having 2 days dump the junk.
I understand that. I do understand. Oh, I don't want them to, think that, okay, just because we're having a ribbon cutting ceremony, you'll bring your goods.
Oh,
Did they really do it 2 days in a row? I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, really?
We did.
A long time ago.
Yeah, wow. I think 1 day is sufficient. Realistically,
right.
right?
I agree.
Okay, well, I don't, I would like to have some sort of a ceremony at one point, okay, because we've put a lot of time and effort, certainly on the new ferry trail. It's a totally whole new trail. The other one kind of came about because of ditching done by Great All, and but that's also good. But I'd like sometime later in May, is that?
I think so, because I don't know whether that's, how that's gonna be looking. I mean, right now, there's no place to park, and it's just a mass of wood chips, and
Yeah, right.
I think it needs a little sprucing up.
Oh, no, right now, I agree. I totally agree. On both ends of that. So we want to look for at a June date? Is that more within reason? You think it might be drier by that time, or you're,
Sure, it'll be drier.
I would hope.
Right.
And why don't we select June?
I'm good with that. I'm just,
It's good to keep open space in the public's mind. You know, the Conservancy does an educational event once a month.
yes, I agree.
Yeah, so
No,
that's-
I totally agree. Okay. Is there a date in June where, again, you want to do this on a Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon? Oh, yes. Yes, here's your phone back.
Well, it'd be good not to do it on the June date of
Island
the
Fest?
Conservancy.
Island Fest.
Island Fest.
Right.
And whatever the Conservancy's doing, which I'm not up to speed on right now.
Right. Island Fest is the first weekend in June?
Yeah,
Right.
second, third, fourth.
Yeah.
So the 10th would be the Saturday after Island Fest.
You want
Do
to
it
try,
June
you want to
10th?
try June 10th?
Yeah.
That's a Saturday?
Yes.
You're available then? You're no longer doing track meets?
As far as I know.
Okay, June 10th, and what, a good 1 o'clock? Is 1 o'clock all right? Let's shoot for that. All right. And by that time, hopefully things will be dried out and we'll have some of these issues with culverts and that taken care of, or,
And if we come back and find that Nature and Land Conservancy has something going, then
Right.
we can
can always change it.
move the date.
Right, exactly. And again, I'm more, I think my whole vision on this, or our vision perhaps, is that, okay, hey, we're doing this because we want the public to use it. We want public to have access. We want public to acknowledge and understand that we're, and we work for you to make these things possible, so. Okay, so June 10th, you're looking at your date?
Yeah, the Conservancy thing is June 11th.
Okay, well, there you go, that's a Sunday. Good. All right, well, let's shoot for the 10th then. Okay, so we have some events coming up.
And their May one is May 7th, so it's good
Okay,
that we're not doing
good,
it then.
very good. All right, so we're working around them, that's also one of our goals, as you know. We're working in conjunction and cooperation with them, and vice versa. Okay, any further for discussion?
Yeah, actually, I have two items. One probably should have gone under trail maintenance.
Okay,
But when we were talking about, getting together with John Kime and DPS and looking at culverts and that, we should take a look at what's gonna take to put in some parking spaces. I would say particularly start with Ferry, and then we could also look at, East River Road where Meridian Woods, but part of that, is on, DTE, either easement or right of way, I'm not quite sure which
right.
one it is. So we'd have to get them involved and let them know what we want to do and make sure it's okay, but the Ferry Road would be open now. In some casual conversation, I've
Right.
had concerns brought up about liability and things like that, but I don't think that's something that is a deal breaker in that. We can put up signage, we can do, whatever it is, but, for people to, unless you ride a bike or walk, you can't get to these trails, and definitely Ferry, you can't, there's no place to park,
No.
there's no shoulder to park on
Right.
that.
Yeah, we just pulled in.
And I think some stone, some, heavy stone in that area, pack it down a little bit, will work just fine for a few people that might be there at any given time.
and this may be something that we need to look to, again, even the township attorney. Okay, I don't think, if we have to modify the original open space
No, you don't.
ordinances, I don't believe you do.
No, because I was looking at the, ordinances, and one of the things is that you can provide parking.
Or access,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
exactly,
where-
right,
yeah.
right. So that's not.
It says driveway. or-
Yeah, and again, keep in mind, some of the access points that we're looking like, oh yeah, this would be good, let's put some gravel down, put some, throw some wood chips on top, is not township property, it's also DTE right of ways, okay? So, I mean, we have to, and, you just don't do things and say, oh, sorry, I mean, sometimes you do. But that's something that we need to consider. But again, if we're acquiring, here's the other piece, if we're acquiring this other piece of property off a horse mill, well, maybe that's also time to take a look at that area too, in the open spaces that we have. So we need to provide access to all and not just, a few.
I would suggest that when we look at that, we involve the township manager on that.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, because he will have an idea of what we need to do and if need be, how to approach Wayne County. As an example, when I first came on the
Right.
board, I looked at perhaps putting down gravel or a designated parking area on Meridian where we have the Meridian Woods there. And I was advised that we really didn't want to do that for a number of reasons. If people pull over on the shoulder, that's already part of the Wayne County road that's there. To expand it, then you start looking at the easements with DTE and perhaps infringing on what Wayne County's right-of-way is, and then you need their approval and clearance and things. So I think the logical place to start with that would be to go with the township manager initially on all these, and he presumably would be able to tell us very quickly, as an example, what you can do at the ferry trailhead, and certainly at the East River trailhead for the Meridian Woods. And that'd be an excellent place to begin.
Good.
And I think we'd learn more from him in about 30 seconds than
Yeah, sure,
trying to do this on our own. I'd start with Derek.
absolutely. Good.
Well, that's fine. I mean, yeah, everything does go through the township at some time
Yeah.
or another. And I think Ferry Road would be the
Well, that's
most
the-
logical one to start with. But
Just-
again, you
right.
don't have a DTE right
Right
away
away.
to
Correct.
deal
Right.
with.
Right.
And you also have a pretty narrow area, you gotta go over that ditch in order to get there. So if you make one false move, you're gonna be in the ditch.
And that's a deep ditch.
That's a deep ditch. Yeah, it is.
And you also have, I believe there's, on that side of Ferry, I believe there's gas lines and some other things there that, on the south side of Ferry, you've been able to, many of the neighbors have been able to fill in the ditch or something close to it.
Right.
But on the north side, that's the drainage, and you have, I think there are some gas lines there.
Right.
So-
Yeah, I think you're
Matter of
right.
fact, I know there are.
Yeah, the more I think about it, I know there is too.
So when you start covering up gas lines, that's a whole nother
Whole
problem.
other problem, right?
Oh, they have heavy equipment that can get through that stuff real easy.
Yeah, okay.
You might need a lawyer, so.
You don't
that'd be
need,
okay,
well, there you
too.
go. Well, this is good. No, we don't, we don't.
Yes, and any of this stuff is gonna end up going through the township attorney anyways.
Certainly through the manager, and,
Yes.
and then he may direct it over to her, so.
Right. Good.
And the second item wanna bring up was in meetings and the objectives, and that is coordinating with the Nature and Land Conservancy in terms of updating the guide, participating in Island Fest and that, which seems to me there should be either a meeting or a presentation or discussion at one of their board meetings and that. So we should be looking to reach out to them in some fashion so we can.
They are always welcome to attend the Greenways Open Space Meeting held the first Tuesday of the month, okay, in the Merle Solomon Boardroom. So there's plenty of seating,
But
ample lighted parking.
I bring that up because we're the ones that are making the suggestion, so I figure we should be the
I
ones.
think it would be
to-
also nice if but we have liaisons, come on, support.
Mandy, are you watching?
Mandy, if you're watching, I know. And again, I was looking at our classic guide to natural areas of Grosse Ile, and I know Bert had a huge hand in this originally and initially, but yes, it needs to be updated, not only just from our standpoint, but also from the Nature and Land Conservancy.
It looks like they've done some updating online.
Right,
on their website.
Exactly.
with that, but
And again,
obviously
that's
not
in our,
print.
as I'm reading our proposed objectives, I put it on appropriately green paper. That's certainly one of our proposed objectives, in addition to collaborating with the GROSSE Nature and Land and expanding our outreach program.
When was the last time that we updated that?
I can tell you, maybe.
5-6 years ago?
Updated June 2019. So it's been a few years. Time flies when you're having fun. Good. Anything else?
That's all I
Good.
had, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, reports here. One of these years, we're gonna get a report from the school, okay? And I need to follow up with that, and will. Carl, you have anything from the township?
Yeah, two things. Number one, there's an article that's coming out in the GROSSE Grand in the April edition. I was selected to write an article, and I chose to write on things that are free or cheap to do on GROSSE, and that included using a lot of the bike path and the open space trails that we have. And look for that when that comes out in about a week and a half. Second thing is, I have spoken with Brian Pollock. I used to sit on the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Commission, and Brian Pollock is the chair, and he also happens to be the Wayne County official for biking and pedestrian pathways. So Brian is that contact at Wayne County, and in a conversation we had recently regarding the path along East River Extension I spoke of earlier, Brian suggested, and I think this is a very good idea, that the chair of the Greenways Open Space Committee and the chair of the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Commission meet perhaps quarterly, just have a cup of coffee, and sit down and see what kind of projects we have in common that we might be able to benefit from. A concrete example, and no pun intended, is the bike path along Meridian between Lowry and Macomb Street is on the east side of Meridian. And what we've been talking about tonight in terms of expanding the use of property on the west side of Meridian, there are crossovers and there are signs and there are things that would make that a safer crossing for anybody biking, walking, and that's an engineering issue, and I think that's something we could talk to Brian about, and perhaps if the chairs were to meet, that would be a great thing, and so I'm encouraging him to give Bill Stevenson a call this week, and perhaps the two of you could just bounce some ideas off of each other, and we could find a way to make this just a slightly better, safer community.
Absolutely.
And I would even go so far as to say if, not because you don't have enough to do, Bill, but if we could do something with the Conservancy along the same line. When we put in that bike path from Grow Road down to Gibraltar Bay Unit, that's going to work out very well for the Conservancy. They need to be involved in the terminus on that, and perhaps even have some ideas regarding the use of some of the areas there. There's a number of phragmites in one area that is just west of where the fence is likely to be placed. You also have the airport there, so if you can perhaps once in a while meet with or have, I think our liaison now is Amanda with the Conservancy. Perhaps a simple phone call or a cup of coffee or something, and we could find out what it is that we all can do together to make this a better place for Nature and Land Conservancy, as well as biking and use of the open space. Another place that comes to mind, the open space property that we have along Meridian. You have a crossover for Meridian School because of that. But if you look at the very north end of the bike path, there is a There is a crossing that would be made in order to access the Hennepin Marsh, which is a very limited area, but that would be off of, again, the bike path is on the east side of the road, and Hennepin Marsh access is on the west side. So we should be looking at perhaps crossings there, so it's safer and easier. The site distances are important, and where you can make the markings, as Wayne County may require, might make a difference.
Not to be picky, but the bike path does not extend down to the Hennepin Marsh. I think it ends at Void or something like that.
It's very close to it.
So it's probably at least a quarter mile, a little bit more, but it,
If you're going to access using the bike path, it's a fairly short distance.
Right.
But again, we should have some ability there to get people from the east side to the west side.
Now, one of the issues I know will be is that, and your point's extremely well taken, is that now that the Nature Conservancy has purchased that piece of property immediately at the corner of Bridge Road as you come off the toll bridge, with the exception of that water pumping station that's there, the building, I mean, that's definitely, again, it's on the west side and the bike path's on the east side. It's a question of how do you safely get from point A to point B? How do you get across, okay, as people are coming off the toll bridge or off that, in that area heading south on Meridian? It's a question of, how do we do that safely? And that's a real important thing. So I would be amenable to meeting with any of those groups.
I think that would be good, see what kind of community of interest. I don't know that Conservancy would be interested in having people go through that property. And again, there's two segments there because there's the one house.
Right.
And I believe they also purchased the stuff south of the three houses that seem to split the property. But whether or not Conservancy would want to have crossings is something that perhaps if the three chairs could sit down and talk about it, we could probably make
amenable
it a
to that.
safer area
Right.
for
I
everybody.
would definitely be amenable to that. Good.
And if you're not available, Ray will go, I'm sure.
Oh, you will.
Thank you, Ray.
I've checked my calendar.
I know. Sometimes you're busy. Okay. Anything else, Carl, from the township?
No, sir, that concludes everything.
Okay. Mandy couldn't be with us this evening, but Roberta, would you please give the Grosse Nature and Land Conservancy report that she forwarded to us?
Right, this is from Amanda Phillips, and a reminder, the Dr. Bruce Jones Memorial Scholarship deadline for high school graduating seniors is Tuesday, April 11th, so that's next week. And graduating seniors should contact the GIHS counseling office for information and to apply. So, yeah, the counseling office has the criteria and all that stuff. Earth Day, Saturday, April 22nd. And we encourage everyone to participate in the Island Cleanup Stewardship event, 10 a.m. to noon. The All Island Cleanup is a Kiwanis-sponsored event, but if you wish to volunteer with the GINLC to help clean up our preserves, meet at the Resource Center, which is at 8801 Macomb Street, at 10 a.m. And the Conservancy is providing gloves and bags. And she says we shouldn't just focus Earth Day on April 22nd. We should make every day Earth Day. There are many things we can do as individuals to combat climate change. And more importantly, we can also influence our elected officials to take action with policies and priorities that they set. The Conservancy May event is a migratory bird walk at the Airport Natural Area. That's 28820 East River Road. So that's the address of the Gibraltar Bay Unit. And the Airport Natural Area is you get in the parking lot, it's on the north side. Sunday, May 7th, and it's a morning walk from 8 to 9:30 a.m. Aaron Parker will lead a spring walk focused on the peak week for arriving songbirds. We'll look and listen to warblers, thrushes, vireos, tanagers, and more. No birding experience is required, but if you own your own binoculars, please bring them along. And then the Take It Outside photo contest, which is open to all area high school students. The contest Deadline is May 11th, and you can find the criteria and the rules and how to submit photographs at GINLC.org. There's a report on the Hennepin Marsh Gateway. We are continuing work removing invasive species and dead trees at Hennepin Marsh, which is on Meridian north of Bridge. The stewardship has made great progress. Most of the dead trees and invasive plants, mainly Phragmites and honeysuckle, have been removed. It will be interesting to see how the preserve comes alive in the spring when the trees leaf out and the marsh grasses return. However, it will be several years before the restoration work at the preserve is completed. The spring newsletter will soon be distributed to all GINLC members. And the Take It Outside photo contest is also underway. Did we just talk about that?
Did.
Right, yeah.
A reminder.
Okay, so that's a reminder. And so the categories for that, just as a little more information, dusk to dawn is one category, fur and feathers, bark and blooms. So you can see we like alliteration. Entries will be judged by category, with winners receiving $50 for first place, $40 for second, and $25 for third place in each category. And a single grand prize overall winner will receive $100. So that's it for the Conservancy, and we hope to see everyone at the event, at the cleanup, and all these high school students who are always have their phones in their hand. They should be pointing them at nature and being outside.
Very good. Excellent. Good. Thank you, Roberta, for handling that for Mandy. As I look at the rest of our agenda, I know that some of our absent members aren't able to give their reports, and we hope that Pam Frucci will be with us perhaps for our May meeting if she's back from her worldwide tour, and as is Theresa. So are there any public comments at this time? Hearing none, and again, you would be limited to as much time as you'd like. Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn at this point?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Bloetscher. Second?
Second.
Mr. Geist? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, again, thank you. Thank you very much